The shattered expanse was a place where hope came to die. It stretched across a forgotten corner of the galaxy, a vast graveyard of broken ships, abandoned stations, and shattered dreams. No government claimed it. No law protected those who lived there. It was home to criminals, exiles, and the desperate. People who had nowhere else to go. Marcus Cole was one of them. He sat in the pilot seat of his old freighter, the Persistent, watching the scanner for anything worth salvaging. The ship was 30 years old, held together by patches, prayers, and stubbornness. Half the systems flickered when they worked at all. The coffee maker had stopped functioning 2 months ago, which Marcus considered the greatest tragedy of his life. But the Persistent was his, the only thing he owned in the entire universe. Marcus was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of hard years. He had been a captain once, a real captain, with a proper ship and a crew and a future. That was before the incident, before the scandal, before everything fell apart. Now he survived by picking through wreckage and selling what he found. It was not a glamorous life, but it was life. And Marcus had learned to appreciate that simple fact. The scanner beeped. Marcus leaned forward, studying the reading. A large debris field, about 2 hours away. The remains of something big, a luxury cruiser, from the energy signature. Rich people carried valuable things. Valuable things meant food for another month. He adjusted course and let the Persistent carry him toward the wreckage. The luxury cruiser had been beautiful once. Now it drifted in pieces, torn apart by weapons fire. Marcus guided his ship carefully through the debris, his experienced eyes reading the destruction like a story. This was not an accident. This was an attack. Someone had wanted this ship dead. Not my business, Marcus muttered to himself. It was his favorite phrase. In the shattered expanse, curiosity killed more people than weapons did. The smart survivors learned to look away. He docked with the largest section of the hull and pulled on his environmental suit. The air inside might be breathable, but Marcus had not lived this long by taking chances. The interior of the cruiser confirmed his suspicions about wealth. Even destroyed, he could see the expensive materials, the fine craftsmanship, the small details that screamed money. He filled his salvage bag with anything that looked valuable. A data pad here, a piece of jewelry there, some medical supplies that had survived the attack. Then he found the hidden compartment. It was behind a wall panel in what had been a private cabin. Marcus almost missed it entirely. But years of salvage work had taught him to look for secrets. Rich people always had secrets. He pried the panel open and stopped breathing. Inside, curled into a ball, was a child. She was alien, that was obvious immediately. Her skin was pale silver, almost luminous, and delicate patterns of gold decorated her temples and cheekbones. Her hair was white as starlight. She wore clothes that probably cost more than Marcus's entire ship. She was also covered in blood and barely breathing. Marcus stood frozen. His mind raced through the options. She was not human, not his species, not his problem. Whatever happened here was dangerous business. The kind that got people killed. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to close the panel and walk away. He had learned long ago that heroes died young in the expanse. The girl's eyes fluttered open. They were violet, deep as space itself, filled with pain and fear and something that looked horribly like hope. "Please," she whispered. Just that one word, in accented common galactic. Then her eyes closed again. Marcus stood there for a long moment, fighting a battle inside himself. "Damn it," he said finally. He reached down and carefully lifted her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. "Not my business. Definitely not my business. This is a terrible idea." He carried her back to his ship anyway. The Persistent had a small medical bay, really just a corner with some basic equipment. Marcus laid the girl on the examination table and began assessing her injuries. Cuts, bruises, a possible broken rib, bad, but not fatal. She had been lucky, if hiding in a compartment while everyone around you died could be called luck. As he worked, cleaning wounds and applying bandages, Marcus studied her more closely. He recognized her species now. Valanthi, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. The Valanthi were beautiful, long-lived, and powerful. They were also famously arrogant. They considered themselves the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Younger species like humanity were barely worth acknowledging. Humans had tried to establish diplomatic relations for decades. The Valanthi had responded with polite indifference at best. What was a Valanthi child doing out here, in the lawless expanse, on a destroyed ship? Then Marcus noticed the markings on her temples more closely. The golden patterns were not just decoration. They were specific symbols, arranged in a specific way. He had seen those symbols before on news broadcasts, on official communications, on images of the Valanthi royal family. His hands stopped moving. "No," he said aloud. "No, no, no." The girl stirred at his voice. Her eyes opened again, clearer this time, though still clouded with pain and fear. She looked up at him, at this strange alien creature with his rough hands and worried face, and spoke. "I am Kalith Sorvain," she said, her voice small but steady. "Third daughter of Empress Vayara the Eternal." She swallowed hard. "They killed everyone. They were going to kill me. Someone in my mother's court. Someone arranged this." Marcus felt the universe tilting beneath his feet. He had just rescued a princess. A Valanthi princess. The daughter of the most powerful ruler in 3 galaxies. The scanner chose that moment to start screaming. Marcus ran to the cockpit, his heart pounding. 3 ships had just appeared at the edge of the debris field. They were fast, armed, and heading directly toward the Persistent. No identification signals. No communication attempts. They were not here to rescue anyone. "Hold on," Marcus shouted, throwing himself into the pilot seat. His hands flew across the controls as the Persistent roared to life. The old ship protested, systems flickering, engine groaning, but she responded. She always responded. The 3 ships opened fire. Marcus flew like a man possessed. He dove into the debris field, using the wreckage as cover, threading his ship through gaps that should have been too small. Warning alarms screamed. The hull shook with near misses. A piece of debris scraped along the side with a sound like a dying animal. In the medical bay, Kalith held onto the examination table and watched through the doorway as this human, this member of a species her tutors had called primitive and insignificant, performed the impossible. One of the enemy ships got too close to an unstable piece of wreckage. Marcus saw the opportunity and took it. Firing the Persistent's weak weapons at the wreckage itself, it exploded, taking the enemy ship with it. 2 left. They pursued him to the edge of the debris field, but Marcus had already calculated his jump. The lightspeed drive was old and unreliable, but it worked when it mattered. The Persistent vanished into the stars. In the sudden silence that followed, Kalith made her way to the cockpit on shaking legs. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face. The ship creaked around them, damaged but alive. "How did you do that?" Kalith asked. The probability of surviving that situation was less than 8%. My tutors would say it was impossible. Marcus laughed, a tired, slightly crazy sound. "Humans don't really believe in impossible. We just call it difficult and keep trying." He checked the navigation computer, and his smile faded. The jump coordinates had been corrupted by the damage. They were somewhere in uncharted space. Weeks away from any system he recognized, the ship was wounded. Supplies were limited, and somewhere behind them, hunters were already planning their next move. A transmission pulsed through the void, encrypted and cold. The human took her. Find them. Kill him. Recover the asset. Marcus looked at the princess, this child who had fallen into his life like a meteor, and sighed heavily. "Well," he said, "I guess we're stuck with each other for a while." Kalith studied him with those ancient violet eyes. She did not understand this human yet. He was rough and strange, and nothing like the elegant being she had grown up with. But he had saved her. When he could have walked away, he had saved her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Don't thank me yet, kid. We've got a long way to go. Outside the windows, unfamiliar stars glittered in the darkness. Their journey had just begun. 3 weeks in the void. That was how long Marcus and Calith had been drifting through uncharted space. 3 weeks of recycled air, rationed food, and the constant hum of a ship that was slowly falling apart. Marcus spent most of his time keeping the Persistent alive. Every day brought a new problem. A leaking fuel line. A failing oxygen filter. An electrical system that sparked and flickered without warning. He crawled through maintenance tunnels, welded patches over holes, and whispered encouragements to his old ship like she was a living thing. Maybe she was, in a way. She had carried him through 10 years of hard living. She had never let him down. Calith watched all of this with confusion. She had grown up in the crystal palace of Seraphel Prime, surrounded by servants who anticipated her every need. Her clothes had been woven from starlight silk. Her food had been prepared by the finest chefs in 3 galaxies. She had never seen someone work with their hands before, not like this, not desperately, not with grease on their face and exhaustion in their eyes. "Why do you not simply request assistance?" she asked on the 4th day, watching Marcus struggle with a broken water recycler. He laughed without humor. "From who? We're alone out here, kid. No one's coming to help. But surely there are protocols, emergency services, someone responsible for. This is the real universe." Marcus interrupted, not unkindly. "Out here, you help yourself or you don't get helped at all." Calith fell silent, processing this information. It contradicted everything she had been taught about how civilizations functioned. The food situation was the hardest adjustment. Marcus divided their supplies with mathematical precision. Each meal was exactly the same size: 1 protein pack, 1 hydration tablet, 1 vitamin supplement. Enough to survive, not enough to feel satisfied. On the 6th day, Calith noticed something strange. Marcus gave her the same portion he took for himself. Exactly equal. "This is incorrect," she said, staring at the food packets. "You are larger than me. You require more calories. And I am." She hesitated. "I am of higher status. The allocation should reflect these facts." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat down across from her, his own meal in his hands. "Let me tell you something about humans," he said. "We don't really believe in that stuff. Higher status. Lower status when you're starving in the dark. It doesn't matter what title you have. We survive together or we die together. That is, inefficient, maybe." Marcus shrugged. "But it's how we do things. Everyone matters the same. Everyone gets the same chance. R. Calith ate her meal in silence, thinking about his words. In her entire life, no one had ever suggested that she was equal to anyone else. She had always been above or, occasionally, in the presence of her mother. Below. The idea of simple equality was strange and uncomfortable, and somehow, a little bit wonderful. The nights were the hardest. Calith could not sleep well. She was haunted by memories of the attack, the screams, the fire, the terrible moment when her guardian had pushed her into the hidden compartment and told her to stay silent, no matter what she heard. She had stayed silent. She had heard everything. On the 10th night, Marcus found her crying in the cargo bay, trying to muffle the sounds so she would not disturb him. He did not say anything. He just sat down beside her, his back against the cold metal wall, and waited. "They killed Verath," Calith finally whispered. "She was my guardian. She taught me to read the star charts. She used to sing me songs when I was scared." Her voice broke. "She told me to hide. She fought them so I could hide. And I just sat there and listened to her die." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough but gentle. "When I was young, there was a fire in my housing block. My neighbor, old man named Chen, he helped me get out, carried me down 6 flights of stairs while the building burned around us. He didn't make it out himself." Marcus stared at the far wall, seeing memories instead of metal. "For years, I felt guilty. Why did he save me? I was nobody. Just some poor kid with no future. Why did I deserve to live when he didn't? What changed? Kaleth asked. I realized I was asking the wrong question. It's not about deserving. People like Chen, like your Varath, they made a choice. They chose to save someone else. That's not a burden we carry. It's a gift we honor. He looked at her directly. The best way to thank them is to live. To become someone worth saving. Kaleth wiped her eyes. The words did not erase her pain, but they gave it a different shape. Something she could carry instead of something that crushed her. Tell me about Earth, she said suddenly. Tell me about your home. So Marcus did. He told her about blue oceans that stretched to the horizon, green forests that hummed with life, cities that glittered at night like fallen stars, mountains capped with white snow, deserts painted in orange and red. It sounds beautiful, Kaleth said. It is. Marcus smiled sadly. I haven't seen it in 15 years. Maybe I never will again. But I carry it with me, you know? Every human does. We carry home in our hearts. On the 15th day, the hunters found them again. The proximity alarm screamed without warning. 2 ships emerged from a nearby nebula, the same unmarked vessels that had attacked before. They had been waiting, Marcus realized, predicting possible routes, setting traps. Get to the cargo bay and strap in, Marcus shouted, throwing himself into the pilot seat. The Persistent groaned as he pushed her engines to full power. The old ship shuddered and complained, but she moved. She always moved when it mattered. The chase lasted 2 hours. Marcus flew through an asteroid field that should have been impossible to navigate. He used every trick he had learned in 20 years of flying cutting engines to drift silently, using asteroids as shields, making sudden direction changes that nearly tore the ship apart. The hunters were good. Their ships were faster, better armed, more advanced in every way. But Marcus had something they did not: complete disregard for what was supposed to be possible. He led them into a dense cluster of asteroids, flying so close to the rocks that his hull scraped against them. One wrong move, and the Persistent would be destroyed. The hunters hesitated, unwilling to follow. That hesitation cost them. Marcus found a gap, a tiny window, and took it. The Persistent shot out the other side of the cluster and jumped to light speed before the hunters could react. When it was over, Marcus sat back in his chair, hands shaking, heart pounding. That had been too close. Far too close. Kaleth appeared in the doorway of the cockpit. Her face was pale, but her eyes were determined. I felt them, she said quietly. The hunters. I felt their minds during the chase. I tried to warn you about the second ship, but I did not know if you heard me. Marcus turned to look at her. He had heard something, a whisper in the back of his mind, a sudden certainty about where the attack would come from. He had assumed it was instinct. That was you? She nodded, suddenly uncertain. My telepathic abilities are untrained. I am not supposed to use them without supervision, but I wanted to help. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then his face broke into a genuine smile. The first real smile Kaleth had seen from him. Kid, you probably saved our lives. That was incredible. Kaleth blinked. Thank you? No, thank you. He laughed, the tension of the chase finally releasing. We make a pretty good team, you know that? Kaleth felt something warm spread through her chest. In her entire life, surrounded by servants and tutors and guards, no one had ever called her part of a team. She had always been apart, above, separate. This felt different. This felt better. On the 19th day, they finally reached the edge of charted space. Kaleth stood in the cockpit beside Marcus, watching familiar stars appear on the navigation screen. They had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. What happens now? She asked. Marcus studied the star charts. We need to get you home. Back to your mother. Back to your people. You'll be safe there. And you? He shrugged, trying to appear casual. I'll figure something out. Always do. Kaleth wanted to say something more, to tell him that she did not want their journey to end, that she had learned more from him in 3 weeks than from years of formal education. that he was the first person who had ever treated her like she mattered as a person rather than a symbol. Before she could find the words, the scanner detected something. A massive ship dropped out of lightspeed directly ahead of them. It was enormous, beautiful, and unmistakably Valanthi. The Imperial Navy had found them. Attention, unknown vessel. The transmission crackled through the persistent speakers. You are carrying a Valanthi citizen. Prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in immediate destruction. Marcus raised his hands slowly, showing he was not touching the weapons controls. Looks like your people found us first, but something was wrong. Kaleth could feel it. The emotions radiating from the ship ahead were not relief or welcome. They were suspicion, hostility, and cold judgment. Marcus, she whispered, they think you kidnapped me. The reality of the situation crashed down on both of them. A human, alone with a Valanthi child, in uncharted space. It looked terrible. It looked criminal. No one would believe the truth. The warship's weapons powered up. Human pilot, the voice continued, harder now. You are charged with the abduction of a member of the Imperial family. You will surrender immediately. You will be executed for your crimes. No, Kaleth screamed, lunging for the communication controls. He saved me. He protected me. You do not understand. But her transmission was blocked. The Valanthi Navy was not interested in hearing from her. They had already made their judgment. Soldiers boarded the Persistent within minutes. Marcus did not resist. Resistance would only confirm their suspicions. He let them put energy shackles on his wrists. He let them drag him off his own ship. Kaleth fought. She screamed. She demanded they listen. But she was a child, and they treated her like one, gently restraining her, assuring her that the monster who had taken her would face justice. He's not a monster, she cried, tears streaming down her face. He's the only reason I'm alive. No one listened. Marcus was dragged toward an airlock. Summary: execution, standard protocol for crimes against the Imperial family. No trial, no defense. Just the cold emptiness of space. Kaleth watched in horror as the man who had saved her, taught her, treated her like an equal, was about to die for his kindness. In desperation, she reached out with her mind, further than she had ever reached before. Through the ship, through space itself, searching for anyone who might listen, and she found someone, a consciousness vast and ancient and cold, a mind she knew better than any other, a presence that had dominated her entire existence. Mother, the Empress of the Valanthi Empire, ruler of 3 galaxies, turned her attention toward her lost daughter's desperate call, and everything stopped. Seraphel Prime was the most beautiful world Marcus had ever seen. The Valanthi throne world glittered like a jewel against the darkness of space. Cities of living crystal stretched toward lavender skies. Rivers of liquid light flowed between towers that touched the clouds. Ships moved through the air like graceful birds, silent and perfect. Marcus saw none of this beauty. He saw it through the small window of a prison transport. His hands bound in energy shackles. His future measured in hours. The Empress had stopped his execution, but she had not declared him innocent. She had simply ordered him brought to the throne world for judgment. Whether that judgment would be mercy or death, no one could say. The transport landed in a courtyard of white stone. Guards surrounded Marcus, immediately tall, elegant Valanthi warriors in armor that seemed to flow like water. They looked at him with disgust. To them, he was an insect, a primitive creature who had dared to touch royalty. They marched him through corridors of impossible beauty, walls that sang with soft music, floors that glowed with inner light, artwork that moved and breathed, and watched him pass. Marcus kept his head high. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him afraid. The throne room of Empress Vayara was larger than any building Marcus had ever entered. Thousands of Valanthi filled the vast space, nobles in flowing robes, military officers in gleaming uniforms, diplomats and advisors and servants. All of them turned to watch as the human was brought forward. At the far end of the room, on a throne of crystallized starlight, sat the Empress herself, Veyara the Eternal had ruled for 3,000 years. She had watched empires rise and fall. She had commanded armies that conquered galaxies. Her face was beautiful and ageless. Her silver skin flawless. Her violet eyes deep as the void between stars. She looked at Marcus like he was a puzzle she could not quite solve. Beside the throne, looking small and frightened but determined, stood Calith. She had been cleaned and dressed in royal garments. She looked like a princess again, but her eyes kept darting to Marcus, filled with worry. "You are Marcus Cole," the Empress said. Her voice was soft but carried perfectly through the enormous room. "A human. A species we have watched from afar, but never engaged with directly." "Yes, Your Majesty," Marcus replied. His voice was steady. "You were found alone with my daughter, in uncharted space, far from any human territory. My daughter was injured. Her escort was dead. The evidence suggests abduction." The Empress tilted her head slightly. "What do you say to these charges?" Marcus took a breath. He knew his life depended on his next words. He also knew that lies would not save him. The Volanthi were telepathic. They would sense deception instantly, so he told the truth. "I found her in the wreckage of her ship," he said. "She was dying. I saved her because she needed saving, not because of who she was, but because she was a child who asked for help. I protected her for 3 weeks while assassins hunted us. I did everything I could to bring her home safely." He paused. "I am not a kidnapper. I am just a man who could not walk away from someone in need." Whispers rippled through the court. The Volanthi were not used to humans speaking so directly to their Empress. Veyara's expression did not change. "Many would say what you say, to save their own lives." "Then look into my mind," Marcus said. "I know your people can do that. Look and see if I'm lying." More whispers. This was unprecedented, a human inviting telepathic examination. Most species considered it a violation, but Marcus had nothing to hide. The Empress raised one elegant hand. A figure stepped forward from the crowd, an elderly Volanthi with deep blue robes. A mind reader, Marcus realized. A professional. The old Volanthi placed his hand on Marcus's forehead. His eyes closed. Seconds passed, then minutes. The entire court held its breath. Finally, the mind reader stepped back. His face showed something Marcus had not expected. Wonder. "He speaks the truth," the old Volanthi announced. "Every word. He saved the princess with no expectation of reward. He protected her against impossible odds. He," the mind reader, hesitated. "He was willing to die for her. A child he did not know. A species not his own. He would have given his life to save hers." The whispers became a roar. The Volanthi court had never heard of such a thing. Humans were supposed to be primitive, selfish, concerned only with their own survival. This did not match their understanding. Calith stepped forward, her voice rising above the noise. "I told you. I told everyone. He saved me. He taught me. He treated me like a person, not a princess." Tears streamed down her face. "He is the bravest, kindest being I have ever known. And you were going to kill him." Silence fell. The Empress looked at her daughter, really looked. Perhaps for the first time in years, she saw something different in Calith. Something stronger. Something that had not been there before. "It seems," Veyara said slowly, "that I owe you an apology, Marcus Cole." But not everyone in the court was pleased. In the shadows, a tall Volanthi noble watched with cold fury. High Chancellor Moravan had served the Empress for 2,000 years. He had accumulated power, influence, and secrets. He had plans that required Calith to remain silent forever. He was the one who had arranged her kidnapping. The attack on her ship was supposed to look like an accident. Calith was supposed to die, removing her from the line of succession and clearing the way for Moravan's preferred candidate. Everything had been perfect. Then this human had ruined everything. Moravan watched Marcus being released from his shackles. He watched Calith embrace the human, with obvious affection. He watched the court murmur with amazement and curiosity about this strange primitive who had saved their princess. This could not be allowed to continue. Caliph might remember something. She might identify the conspirators. She might expose everything. The human had to die, and Caliph had to be silenced permanently. Marcus was given quarters in the palace, comfortable rooms that were larger than his entire ship. He was not a prisoner anymore, but he was not free either. The Empress had not decided what to do with him. Caliph visited whenever she could escape her handlers. She told him about the palace, about the politics, about the 1,000 small rules that governed royal life. She seemed desperate to maintain their connection. "They want me to forget," she said one evening, sitting cross-legged on his floor like a regular child instead of a princess. "My tutors say the experience was traumatic. They say I should focus on my studies and put the unpleasantness behind me." "And what do you want?" Marcus asked. She looked at him with those deep violet eyes. "I want to understand. Someone tried to kill me. Someone in this court. I want to know who and why." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. She was right, the kidnappers had known exactly where her ship would be. That information could only have come from inside the palace. "That's dangerous thinking," he said carefully. "Powerful people protect their secrets. You told me humans don't believe in impossible." Caliph replied. "You told me you keep trying no matter what." Were those just words? Marcus smiled despite himself. The kid learned fast. "All right," he said. "Let's figure this out, together." Over the following days, Marcus began watching the court with salvager's eyes. He noticed things the Valanthe overlooked. Guards whose patrol patterns created convenient blind spots. Servants who watched Caliph too closely. A group of nobles who always stopped talking when certain topics arose. He was not a detective. He was just a man who had spent years surviving by reading people. And something in this beautiful palace was very, very wrong. The break came from an unexpected source. A young servant girl approached Marcus in a garden, her movements nervous, her eyes darting. "You saved the princess," she whispered. "You are not like the others. You might actually care what happens to her." "What do you know?" Marcus asked quietly. "High Chancellor Moravin. I serve in his household. I have heard things. Plans. Names." The girl was trembling. "He arranged everything. The kidnapping. The attack. And he is planning something else. Something soon." Before she could say more, she spotted someone approaching and fled. Marcus's blood ran cold. The High Chancellor, one of the Empress's most trusted advisors. If he was behind this, the conspiracy went to the very top. That night, someone tried to kill Marcus. The poison was elegant, almost undetectable. It was placed in his evening meal, a toxin designed for Valanthe physiology that should have killed him instantly. But Marcus was not Valanthe. Human biochemistry was strange, unpredictable. Different enough that the poison merely made him violently ill instead of stopping his heart. He spent the night in agony, his body fighting the foreign substance with everything it had. Caliph found him the next morning, barely conscious on the floor. Her scream brought guards. Her tears brought physicians. Her fury brought attention that the conspirators had hoped to avoid. "Someone tried to murder him," Caliph declared, her voice shaking with rage. "Someone in this palace. And I am going to find out who." As Marcus recovered, weak but alive, he looked up at the young princess standing over him like a protective guardian. She had changed so much from the frightened child he had found in the wreckage. "You should be careful," he managed to say. "These people are dangerous. Then we will be dangerous too," Caliph replied. Her eyes burned with determination. "You taught me that giving up is not an option. We find the truth, Marcus. Whatever it costs." In the shadows of the palace, High Chancellor Moravin learned that the human had survived. His calm facade cracked, just slightly. It was time for more direct measures. Marcus healed slowly. Human bodies were tough but not fast. The Valanthe physicians did their best, but they did not fully understand his biology. They gave him medicines that sometimes helped and sometimes made things worse. In the end, Marcus relied on what had always saved him before: stubborn refusal to stay down. Within 3 days, he was walking. Within 5, he was planning. Caliph visited every day, bringing information she gathered from servants and guards who trusted her. The princess had changed. She no longer waited for others to solve her problems. She asked questions, watched faces, listened to whispers in corridors. "Morven is getting nervous," she reported one evening. "He has increased security around his chambers. He has sent messages to allies in other noble houses. Something is happening." Marcus nodded grimly. "He knows we're getting close. Desperate people do desperate things. We need to move faster." "But we still have no proof," Calith said, frustration clear in her voice. "My mother will not act against her High Chancellor without evidence. His family has served the throne for 6,000 years. Their loyalty is considered absolute. Then we need to make him show his true face." Calith looked at Marcus with concern. "What are you planning?" Marcus smiled, a thin, dangerous smile that Calith had never seen before. "Something stupid. Something human." The plan was simple because simple plans were harder to break. Marcus would make himself a target. He would let Morven know that he had evidence, that he had spoken to witnesses, gathered information, and was preparing to present it to the Empress. This was a lie, but Morven would not know that. Faced with exposure, the Chancellor would have to act. He would have to silence Marcus personally, directly, in a way that could be witnessed and recorded. "This is insane," Calith protested when Marcus explained. "You are using yourself as bait. He will kill you." "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "But it's the only way to expose him. Your mother needs to see the truth with her own eyes. She needs to see what her trusted advisor really is. There must be another way." Marcus knelt down to look Calith in the eyes. "Your people have a saying, right? The stars belong to those who reach for them. Well, humans have a saying too. Some things are worth dying for." He put his hand on her shoulder. "You're worth it, kid. Your future, your safety, your chance to become who you're meant to be. That's worth everything." Calith's eyes filled with tears. "You are the most foolish being I have ever known." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But I'm also your friend. And friends don't let friends face monsters alone." The trap was set for the following night. Marcus spread rumors through carefully chosen channels. He let slip that he would be in the Eastern Garden at midnight, preparing his evidence for presentation to the Empress. He made sure these whispers reached Morven's servants. Then he waited. The Eastern Garden was beautiful in the darkness. Luminescent flowers glowed softly. A fountain sang with liquid light. The 3 moons of Seraphel Prime cast silver shadows across the paths. Marcus stood alone, apparently unaware of any danger. He was not alone. Hidden in the shadows, Calith watched with recording devices that would capture everything. She had insisted on being there, and Marcus had been unable to refuse her. The stubbornness was something she had learned from him. Midnight came and went. The garden remained silent. Then Marcus heard footsteps. High Chancellor Morven emerged from the darkness, flanked by 4 guards. He wore flowing robes of deep purple, and his ancient face was twisted with cold fury. "Human," Morven said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You have caused me considerable trouble." Marcus turned slowly to face him. "Chancellor, nice night for a walk. Do not play games with me. I know you have been investigating. I know you have been asking questions about matters that do not concern you." Morven stepped closer. "It ends tonight." "Why?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice calm. "Why try to kill her? She's just a child." Morven laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "Just a child? She is 3rd in line for a throne that controls 3 galaxies. Her existence threatens carefully laid plans that are older than your entire species." His eyes narrowed. "The succession must follow the proper path. Certain alliances must be preserved. Calith was an obstacle." "An obstacle," Marcus repeated. "You tried to murder a little girl because she was inconvenient." "I tried to secure the future of the Valanthi Empire," Morven corrected. "Something a primitive creature like you could never understand. We have ruled the stars for 100,000 years. We do not allow sentiment to interfere with necessity." Marcus felt anger burning in his chest. You know what the difference is between your people and mine? We've only been in space for a few centuries. We're young, inexperienced, primitive by your standards. But we would never, never sacrifice a child for politics. That's not strength. That's cowardice. Moriven's face contorted with rage. You dare lecture me. You are nothing. Your species is nothing. You are insects, crawling in the dirt while we touch the stars. Maybe, Marcus said, but this insect is about to ruin your day. He raised his voice. Did you get all that, Calith? Moriven's eyes widened with shock. He spun around just as Calith stepped from the shadows, holding a recording device. Every word, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. Including your confession. For a moment, Moriven stood frozen. Then his face twisted into something ugly, all pretense of elegance gone, replaced by naked hatred. Kill them, he ordered his guards. Kill them both. The guards moved fast, but Marcus was ready. He had spent his life surviving against impossible odds. He had fought pirates, criminals, and desperate men across 100 stations. The Valanthi guards were trained in elegant combat forms passed down through millennia. Marcus fought dirty. He grabbed a handful of luminescent flowers and threw them in the first guard's face. The pollen was not harmful, but it was blinding. As the guard stumbled, Marcus took his weapon and used it against the second attacker. Run, he shouted at Calith. Get the recording to your mother. Calith hesitated for just a moment, her heart torn between obedience and the desperate need to help. Then she ran, clutching the device that held Moriven's confession. 2 guards chased her. 2 remained with Marcus. The fight was brutal. Marcus was still weak from the poisoning, and the guards were stronger, faster, better trained. But Marcus had something they lacked. Absolute commitment. He did not fight to win. He fought to buy time. He took a blow that cracked his ribs. He kept fighting. He took a cut across his arm that bled freely. He kept fighting. He knocked one guard unconscious with a desperate strike. The other tackled him to the ground. Moriven stood over them, watching with cold satisfaction. Enough, he commanded. The guard pinned Marcus down, helpless. You cannot stop this, Moriven said. The girl will be caught before she reaches the Empress. The recording will be destroyed, and you will die here, forgotten, meaningless. Marcus looked up at him, blood on his face, defiance in his eyes. You don't know humans very well. A commotion erupted from the garden entrance. Moriven turned, and his face went pale. Empress Veyara stood at the garden's edge, surrounded by the Imperial Guard. Beside her, breathing hard but triumphant, stood Calith. I believe, the Empress said, her voice like ice, that I have heard enough. Moriven tried to run. He made it 3 steps before the Imperial Guard seized him. His remaining loyal guards surrendered immediately. No one defied the Empress directly. Veyara walked slowly across the garden, her gaze fixed on the Chancellor, who had served her for 2,000 years. Her face showed no emotion, but her eyes burned with cold fire. I trusted you, she said quietly. My family trusted you. For generations, your house has stood beside the throne. Everything I did was for the Empire, Moriven began. You tried to murder my daughter. The Empress's voice cut through his words like a blade. You conspired against the royal bloodline. You betrayed every oath you ever swore. She turned away. Take him. He will face the full judgment of the court. As Moriven was dragged away, he looked back at Marcus with pure hatred. This is not over, human. My allies will. Your allies are already being arrested. Veyara interrupted. Your conspiracy has been unraveled. You have nothing left but the justice you will receive. The guards pulled him into the darkness. Marcus lay on the ground, too exhausted to move. Calith ran to him and knelt by his side. Marcus, are you all right? You're bleeding everywhere. I've had worse, Marcus lied. He had not, in fact, had worse. Everything hurt. Did we win? Did we win? We won. Calith was crying and laughing at the same time. We actually won. Tail. The Empress approached, looking down at the wounded human with an expression Caliph had never seen before, something almost like respect. "You nearly died," Viara observed. "For my daughter. For a child not of your species." "Why?" Marcus managed a weak smile. "Because she needed help. Because it was the right thing to do." He coughed, wincing at the pain. "Humans are simple like that." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then she turned to her guards. "Take him to the medical center. The best physicians. Whatever he needs." She paused. "This human saved the life of a princess. The Empire owes him a debt." As Marcus was carefully lifted and carried away, Caliph held his hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You stubborn, foolish, wonderful human. You did it." Marcus squeezed her hand weakly. "We did it," he corrected. "Together." Above them, the 3 moons of Seraphel Prime continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the fates of empires and the courage of one ordinary human who refused to give up. Marcus woke in a room made of light. Soft golden sunshine streamed through crystal walls. The bed beneath him was softer than anything he had ever felt. Machines hummed quietly nearby, monitoring his healing body. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then memory returned: the garden, the fight, Moravin's defeat, and he relaxed. He was alive. Against all odds, he was still alive. A small figure was curled up in a chair beside his bed. Caliph had fallen asleep while watching over him, her silver hair spilling across her face, her hand still reaching toward his. Marcus smiled. The kid had stayed with him. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through his ribs, his arm, his everywhere. The Valanthi physicians had done remarkable work, but human bodies still healed at human speeds. His movement woke Caliph. Her violet eyes flew open, and her face transformed with relief. "You're awake." She jumped from the chair and grabbed his hand. "The physicians said you would recover, but you slept for 3 days." "I was so worried." 3 days, Marcus groaned. "That's a long nap even for me." "You almost died." Caliph's voice trembled. "Your heart stopped twice during surgery. They said human bodies are fragile, that they did not understand how you survived at all." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Told you, humans are too stubborn to die when we're supposed to." Caliph laughed through her tears. It was the most beautiful sound Marcus had heard in a long time. The following weeks brought changes that Marcus could never have imagined. Moravin's conspiracy was completely exposed. Dozens of nobles were arrested. Ancient alliances crumbled overnight. The Valanthi court was shaken to its foundations not just by the betrayal, but by the method of its defeat. A human had saved the princess. A human had exposed the conspiracy. A human had done what the entire Valanthi Imperial Guard could not. The galaxy took notice. News spread across 3 galactic empires. The story of Marcus Cole, the primitive human who protected a Valanthi princess, became legend. Some called it propaganda. Others called it impossible. But everyone was talking about it. And everyone was talking about humanity. For centuries, the Valanthi had dismissed humans as young, crude, and insignificant. Now they were forced to reconsider. If one human could do this, what might millions of them accomplish? 1 month after the conspiracy's fall, Empress Viara summoned Marcus to the throne room. He walked through the vast chamber on his own feet, this time healed, though still sore. Caliph walked beside him, her chin held high, her presence a statement that the court could not ignore. The Empress sat on her throne of crystallized starlight, watching their approach with ancient, unreadable eyes. "Marcus Cole," she said when he stood before her, "you have created a problem for me." "I seem to do that a lot," Marcus replied. A hint of amusement flickered across Viara's face. "Humanity was meant to remain separate. Your species was considered too young, too volatile to join galactic civilization properly. We intended to observe you for several more centuries before making contact. With respect, Your Majesty, we've never been good at waiting for permission." "No," the Empress almost smiled. "I am beginning to understand that." She rose from her throne, an act that made the entire court gasp. Empresses did not stand for anyone. You saved my daughter's life, Vayara continued. You exposed traitors in my own court. You demonstrated courage that my own people failed to show. This debt cannot be repaid with simple gratitude. She descended the steps until she stood directly before Marcus. They were nearly the same height, the human and the ancient empress, face to face. I am offering you a position, Vayara said. Official protector of Princess Kalith. A title that has not been granted to anyone outside the Valanthi species in 10,000 years. You would have status, resources, and a place in our society. Marcus felt the weight of 1,000 staring eyes. The court was holding its breath. And what would this mean for my people? He asked. For humanity? Vayara's eyes glittered with something like respect. It would mean doors opening that have been closed for generations. Trade agreements, diplomatic relations, a seat at tables where your species has never been welcome. She paused. One human changed our perception. Imagine what all of you might do. Marcus looked at Kalith. The princess was trying to contain her hope, but it shone from her eyes like starlight. He thought about the persistent, still sitting in a Valanthi hangar. He thought about the shattered expanse, about the salvage runs and the loneliness and the years of just surviving. He thought about home Earth, which he had not seen in 15 years, and he thought about a frightened child in a hidden compartment, whispering one word, please. Okay, Marcus said, I'll stay. Kalith's face broke into the brightest smile he had ever seen. The years that followed changed everything. Marcus became a bridge between worlds. Humans began appearing in Valanthi, space traders, diplomats, scientists, artists. Slowly, the ancient empire's perception shifted. Humanity was no longer the primitive species to be ignored. They were the persistent species. The surprising species. The species that produced people like Marcus Cole. Kalith grew into her role with Marcus at her side. She became known for radical ideas, treaties that favored cooperation over dominance, outreach to species that had been dismissed for millennia, a genuine interest in understanding rather than controlling. Her tutors called her unconventional. Her critics called her dangerous. Her supporters called her the future. Through it all, Marcus remained her protector, her advisor, and her friend. He taught her human sayings and human history, and human stubbornness. She taught him Valanthi poetry and Valanthi philosophy, and how to navigate a court full of people who wanted him to fail. They made an unlikely pair, the ancient princess and the salvager from the stars. But somehow, they worked. 10 years after his arrival on Serafel Prime, Marcus stood in a great assembly hall. Representatives from dozens of species filled the vast chamber. Valanthi nobles sat beside human diplomats. Ancient races who had not spoken to each other in centuries shared the same space. At the front of the hall, Kalith addressed the assembly. She was grown now, no longer a child, but a young woman with her mother's grace and her father figure's stubborn determination. Her silver skin glowed under the lights. Her voice carried clear and strong. My people have a saying, Kalith announced. The stars belong to those who reach for them. For 3,000 years, we believed that meant us. We believed we were the chosen rulers of the galaxy. She paused, letting her words settle. We were wrong. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Marcus smiled from his position near the wall. The stars do not belong to any single species. Kalith continued. They belong to everyone brave enough to explore them. Everyone stubborn enough to survive in them. Everyone kind enough to help a stranger in need. Her eyes found Marcus across the crowded room. I know this because a human taught me. A human who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay. A human who showed me that true strength is not about power or age or technology. It is about heart. She smiled, and in that smile was the child who had once asked a wounded stranger why he would not stop trying. The stars belong to those who reach for them. Let us reach together. The assembly erupted in applause. Later that night, Marcus stood on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. Kalith found him there, staring up at the stars with a distant expression. What are you thinking about? She asked, standing beside him. Home, Marcus admitted. Earth. I wonder what they'd think if they could see me now. The kid who was never going to amount to anything. Standing in an alien palace. Changing history. Caliph leaned against the railing. Do you regret staying? Not for a second. He looked at her. This remarkable young woman who had become his family. I found something better than home. I found a purpose. Thanks for watching. Caliph was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke softly. When I was hiding in that compartment, listening to everyone die, I thought it was the end. I thought the universe was cold and cruel and empty. She turned to face him. You taught me I was wrong. You taught me that there is kindness in the darkness. That one person can make a difference. Marcus felt his eyes grow wet. He blinked it away. He was too old to cry. You did all the hard work, kid. I just showed up. You showed up, Caliph repeated. That was everything. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moons rise over the crystal towers. Behind them, in the palace, Empress Viara observed from a window. She had ruled for 3,000 years. She had seen species rise and fall, empires bloom and crumble, alliances form and shatter. She had never seen anything quite like this. A human and a princess, standing together as equals. As family. Once, she had feared what humanity might become. Now, watching her daughter laugh at something the human said, she wondered if she should have been hoping instead. The galaxy was changing. Old certainties were fading. New possibilities were emerging. And it had all started with one stubborn human who refused to leave a child behind. The stars glittered overhead, eternal and patient, waiting to see what wonders this unlikely alliance would create. The future was uncertain. The challenges ahead were immense, but for the first time in 3,000 years, it felt like anything was possible. The end.